You know, this is an era of spectacular progress, particularly in bringing the good things of life to more and more people.
And from their talks was forged a map for the path to freedom, a compact for the future, for the future, for the future. A map for the path to freedom.
We'll just kind of jump into it.
Okay. Right, whenever we get to the... Do you want to hear about the stickmen?
The stickmen, the Boulder Creek Voices. I'll probably tell a few stories about like spiritual experiences and encounters, and I'm thinking we could even talk about just the general metaphysical, spiritual plane of reality that no one really talks about, you know? So, and maybe even discuss some theology around that, some personal experiences. Even ghost stories. Not that we'll make it like about, you know, like weird witchcraft ghost stories. But, oh, Nathan's here.
Yeah, and I'm not, like I said, I've never really been into ghost stories. There's a lot of them in my family, but I mean, my older sister's very superstitious about ghosts. And once I became a Christian, I believed that, well, there's no ghost because, you know, when you're dead until the judgment day, right? So if you're seeing something, then it's not a ghost, it's something else. Or there's something. And it's like, I think it's Shakespeare, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, or he says. You know, more things in heaven and earth than you dream of.
Wow.
Right. And I agree with that. I think there's some pretty strange things.
Wow.
And I've never run across them, I guess. But anyway, you guys met the friend of mine that I worked with named Randall, great big guy.
Okay.
And he asked me...
Where did I meet him?
In Independence. You and Bethany were downtown. Randall, big Indian, great big guy.
Oh, yeah.
So I worked... Well, he pointedly asked me, he says, so you spend a lot of time in the woods. So you ever have anything strange happen? And I said, really? Absolutely. Thank you for asking, because I have lots of strange things happen. So, and I told him about the stickmen, or you know, the stick people. It turns out that his tribe, and almost every tribe, has legends of the stick people, right? But I didn't know a thing about it, you know, at the time. So anyway, it goes back to, we bought a little piece of property.
This was 20, 30 years ago?
Let's see, I'm gonna say it was 1994, maybe? 3, 4, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Long time ago, now.
Okay.
And Sue and I bought a little piece of property at the edge of the wilderness. And you're talking very rugged wilderness, right? We still have the property.
Yeah, in Eastern Oregon. Yeah.
And, you know, it's really neat, but you gotta be in pretty good shape to even
make use of the land.
To use it, even to walk from the driveway up to it is a pretty good walk.
And a lot of native history there.
Absolutely, the Mnaha River.
Right.
That's
good elk hunting, but treacherous terrain, from what I understand.
Very treacherous terrain, Right.
Okay.
And sometimes I can't remember if it was the first year or the second year when this happened, but I'm going to say it was the first year. And my brother shot an elk. But anyway, so the whole story of this property is kind of weird, because it was so idyllic when we first got it, you know, and then it seems like things kept happening to it over and over and over again to make it kind of a difficult pain in the butt. I mean, now, you know what I mean? It's just something, but I don't know how this change took place, but so I think it started with the stickmen. So
That's interesting.
We set up camp.
Okay.
Right, and if I remember right, that year it was raining, or at least at first it was raining.
Right.
And so the ridges, you know, above our property are very steep and rugged. So my brother, he took one ridge, and I took another ridge, so that we were basically a whole canyon apart. So he started hiking up, you know, in the dark, you know, early morning, hiking up the ridge, and I started up the other. And anyway, I probably made it, you know, half a mile or something, where I was starting to, you know, slow down and look for elk. And and I was, of course, wanting to avoid, you know, hoping not to see other hunters or anything like that. I wanted to have a wilderness hunting experience by myself. And but anyway, as I was traversing, you know, below this ridge, I looked down quite a ways below me, and I saw something and I thought, oh, there's another hunter down there.
And your brother Brady was a whole different...
He was a whole different canyon. Ridge away, yeah. So probably he was a mile away or more, I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway, I saw this object and I thought, oh, it's a hunter. And he's just standing there. And so I thought, well, I said, well, it's not, I'm not sure it's a hunter, but it sure looks like one from here. And it looked like a guy wearing a red and black checkered shirt with an Elmer Fudd hat on and with a rifle on his shoulder.
Yeah.
But he was standing there. So anyway, I thought, well, before I change my hunting plans, I'm going to make sure. So I removed the scope from my rifle and kind of looked at the hunter.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, that's not a hunter at all. It's just an old wooden snag.
Huh.
Just an old wooden snag. But I kept looking at it, and the longer I looked at it, the less I was sure whether it was really a piece of wood or a hunter. So, and then I would move a little ways. I thought, well, I'll get a change of angle and show you that will prove, that'll give me a, what do you call it, triangulation. So I moved a little ways further, looked at it again. Still, now it looks even more like it's human. It's standing there, it's just staring at me. But the disturbing thing was, the face on the thing was like this old wrinkled brown face with a grumpy expression like this. And it was just like, go away. That's a sense like I was like, go away. And I was like, oh, wow. I thought, well, and I started to get kind of confusing in my mind. It's like, well, this is really weird. So I don't know if it's a hunter or a man, but I think maybe it's both. This is what my mind was telling me, is both. It's both. And you better get out of here because you just don't want to be here. So so after I looked at it 3 or 4 more times, it would always look the same. Yeah. And so finally I just went up over the ridge.
But the fascinating thing is that it was hard to tell if it was alive or not, if it was a tree or a man.
Right.
Which is really strange to me.
Well, it was. It was just what are the sensations I was having were really strange.
Yeah.
And don't think I've ever experienced anything quite like that. But,
yeah.
So I moved. I just said, I'm getting out of here. So I went to the next ridge. And it was funny because when I went over the ridge into the next canyon, I got into some kind of dark forest. And then I could hear, later on, I heard a whole bunch of shooting like up that same canyon where I'd been hunting. And I thought, well, it's a good thing I moved because somebody's just blazing away up there. I thought, well, this is better. So anyway, I hunted for, a couple hours or more, and then I didn't see any elk, and I made my way back to camp. And so my brother had shot an elk, and the funny thing was, the reason he shot the elk was that he was working up his own ridge, and he had the exact experience that I had. I mean, exact down to almost the minutest detail. And he did exactly, behaved the same way. He took his scope off and looked at, he saw the stick man. We started calling him stick men at that point. Yeah. And
because didn't you say he came back to camp just with eyes like saucers, and he's like, you'll never believe what just happened. Yeah. And didn't he tell you this basically the exact same story?
Yeah, and then I got the joy of saying, well, that's exactly what happened to me. And but anyway, so he finally did the same thing. So he went up the ridge over into the next canyon. Okay. He got the sensation of,
you got to leave.
And we both had this sense like, well, whatever it is, better be left alone. Yeah. It's not something to be messed with, whatever it is. Yeah. Okay. So he went up to the next canyon. He went up over the ridge, down to the timber, and went right into a herd of elk. And there was a bull elk, and he shot it. And he wouldn't have ever probably done it.
If he hadn't been scared out of his mind down the other canyon.
Right.
Wow.
So anyway, it was very, very interesting. And it wasn't until maybe a year after that I was reading a novel. And this novel had to do, some of the characters were Nez Perce Indians and on an elk hunt. And he talked about the stick people. I was really fascinated. I'm reading this novel by this guy, and he's talking about stick people. And they call them the shepherds of the elk or something like that. No kidding. But anyway, it was the kind of thing at the time that just, raised the hairs on the back of your neck. Right. And then now as I'm older, I can't really feel what I felt then. But I do know that I was really genuinely scared though. And I just realized, I just knew had to get out of there. You know, just
right.
go get away from it, whatever it is.
Right.
You know, can't be good, or it can't be good for me anyway. But,
yeah, that's super interesting. So, but then the guy you were working with.
Yeah, now Randall. So he asked me. You know, tell him some stories. And that's the
and he was Native
American. He's
Native American.
Warm Springs Indian, right, from over Cascade, and he said their tribe has the legends of the stick people, and so I think.
So what did he say?
He said they were supposed to be like guardians or something. He didn't know. He wasn't as well versed as like his elders would be,
right?
You know, because they pass on a lot of their traditions with stories, but he did know about them. And he'd heard his grandmother or grandfather tell him stories about the stick people.
Wow. So what did he like? What did he say? And even in the novel you read, like what were the characteristics? Did they believe these people to be real people, or were they more spiritual beings that people would see? Or
I think that they believed they were real, but also believed that you had to leave them alone, and they didn't want to disturb them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So they weren't something to be messed with.
Right.
They were just something that was there, but you avoided them if possible.
That is so interesting.
So after that year, we went hunting there the next year.
Yeah.
And everything was fine that year except for the snow. It was a huge snowstorm. And we were trying to hunt, and it was kind of useless. 2 feet of snow, 15 below zero. And it's kind of like, wow, this is different than last year, you know. So we kind of gave up on elk hunting that time. The next year we went back, a tree had fallen on our trailer. The little trailer, and it had the bunk beds at the end. So this enormous tree from way up, above on the other side of the canyon had fallen, and it completely just, cut that into
the trailer.
Bunk beds.
Straight through the bunk beds.
Oh, if anyone had been sleeping there, they would have been gone. I mean, in the bunk beds. So all that was left was this trailer that was like chopped neatly off. And so we're trying to figure out, well, how do we camp in it? You know what I mean? So we kind of patched it up, and we tried to camp.
Was it you and Brady?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I think Mike went with us.
Okay.
And so it got worse and worse. So then in 1995,
okay,
flash flood roared through our little canyon, right? And so there was a house below our property. It took half of that house off. It was basically a bunch of water and boulders and mud that just came roaring down that canyon, right? And for some reason, it didn't touch our trailer. I was actually hoping that it would just take the thing, but it didn't. It didn't make the
right.
But another tree had fallen on the trailer and you couldn't even tell. It was just top of a tree about this big. And I looked all around. I couldn't see any broken trees. I'm like, all right, what's the joke? I was like, it got hurled like a mile or something. Like, there, have that. Okay, so maybe we made the stickmen mad or something. I don't know, but it just kind of went downhill after that. To where it got more and more difficult to get in there.
Right.
And then another guy bought the lot down below us.
Okay.
And kind of strange, surly people.
Yeah.
And they just never seemed very friendly. So anyway. I don't know. I don't know if it all started with the stickmen, or maybe, I do remember, maybe it was a warning, it's like, hey, just don't mess with this place because it's bad news,
Right.
It's weird. But.
Oh, that's so interesting. Well, that opens up the whole reality and topic that's very rarely spoken of the spirit realm. I mean, the native community are deeply spiritual people.
Yeah.
Very connected to the land itself, connected to spirituality. And, like I've heard radical missionary stories, like a woman named Nancy Cohen has done missions all over the world, eaten rats, bats, snakes, like drank blood, on the most obscure. She's this woman from Texas, this minister from Texas, and just loves Jesus, and has, gone to China with no money and no contacts, and gets picked up by someone in the airport that knows her name, and gets plugged into the underground church in China, all this radical stuff. But she tells this story about being in this extremely remote jungle in South America. I can't remember where it is, but these people these jungle people they were an unreached people group entirely. Like they had never heard the gospel preached. They'd never heard the name of Jesus.
Wow.
And they were, I mean, still living in some ways like Stone Age style, you know? And she went in, and these were a deeply spiritual people, you know? So a lot of that, I think, can be just utterly demonic and kind of the wrong spirit, you know? People picking up and partnering with the wrong spirit. But I believe also there's a side that's rarely talked about of Native Americans. There's so many small caveats. We're gonna have a very simplistic conversation about this, I think, because to fully talk about this, we would need hours and hours to unpack and fully, you know, pull the theology out. But I think there are a lot of Native people that actually do have genuine experiences with the Lord Jesus.
Oh, absolutely.
Even without knowing his name.
Very possible.
This Nancy Cohen, she's talking with this man, 90 years old, the spiritual leader, you know, of this tribe through a translator. And she's telling him about Jesus, telling him about the gospel, like how Jesus came to bring light and truth, and you know, John 1, that we're called to be children of God, and this whole thing. And as she's telling him, he's weeping, just tears start streaming down his face. And so she's asked through the translator, you know, why is he weeping? And he says to her, for 60 years I've walked through the jungle, and the spirit of truth and revelation, that's what he said, the spirit of truth and spirit of revelation has spoken to me and taught me all of the things you've just told me.
No kidding.
And he said, now I know the name of this God, that it's Jesus.
Now he knows his name.
And she just lost it, like weeping. Like it totally broke her missionary religious box.
I can totally buy that.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's been hearing the truth. He just didn't know some of the, you know, the author yet of this truth.
Exactly.
And there's so many instances of the Native American tribes in our part of the United States, and they had prophecies, and the prophecies were true. They were real.
Wow.
So whatever the source, you know, of their prophecies, you know, was, I don't know, but a lot of them knew that the white man was coming a long time before.
Wow.
And that they would have airplanes, and they would have, you know, when nobody knew what an airplane was.
They would have these visions.
They saw the airplanes in their dreams and visions, you know. Wow. And they called them Iron Bird or something, you know. But so they knew that this change was coming. A lot of the more spiritual people that you're talking about.
I had no idea. That is fascinating. So there's a verse in Romans, the book of Romans, says the gifts and callings of God are irrevocable or irremovable. They're without repentance. So so we talked about this before, I think, a little bit. But for example, take someone who reads tarot cards, or a witch, or even a warlock, or someone that practices magic, or like future reading or whatever. That person, I believe, has a God-given gift of prophecy, a God-given gift to see, and like a gift to pick up on future events. That's God-given, but it's anointed by a wrong spirit oftentimes. So the gift is there. Like I think God creates us in our other mother's womb with certain gifts and propensities toward certain areas. And I think the Native people, being so deeply connected to the land, and just like American people are pioneer type, entrepreneurial, prosperous people, I think as a whole, I would say, and hardworking, I would say the Native people are spiritually inclined, like very discerning, and very prophetic, you know, as a people.
A lot of them.
Which is just amazing.
It is, really.
It's amazing.
It's kind of part of a neat heritage, you know. It is. For us, too, because we're all sharing the same soil. But yeah, sometimes, it's kind of difficult being really connected to the land, because you're connected to the land, and then you have this, connection with other, all those who have gone before you, and they were connected to the land. So in sometimes that can be, sometimes you wish you weren't, but you are. You can't help it.
Yeah. Tell me more about that. What, is that something you feel?
Yeah, it's like, I think it runs in my family, but I guess we've always tried to live at the fringe of society, I think. That goes back many generations. And
because many generations ago, would have been your grandfather or your great grandfather that actually pioneered.
Yeah, they
over to Oregon.
They had homesteads in different places. Some of the homesteads are way up in the middle of nowhere, far away as you can get from anybody.
Yeah.
But definitely, they pioneered in places that were rough and pretty unpeopled.
So they grew up. They were all hunters.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, hunting.
Farmers.
And they weren't. Yeah, the side that I'm talking about, would be the Blevins line. They weren't really farmers. I mean, they were more like me, hunter gatherers. Sometimes they were transient laborers. They'd go find some work for the summer over the mountains and then come back. For like the railroad or harvesting. And that was the way things were done back then.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good way, but they like to live wild, definitely. I mean, just, free lives.
Well, I think there's something really interesting about connection to the land, because there's I think it's in maybe 2 Chronicles that talks about God healing the land.
Yeah.
If you humble yourself, call out to me, and pray, the Lord says, I will reach out and heal your land. And then there's another verse in Romans 8 that actually talks about all of creation is groaning for the revealing of the sons of God. That creation was subject to futility, to brokenness, essentially, because of sin and brokenness.
Right.
But now is actually crying out. So even biblically, there is, and this is I think this whole podcast with you is going to be very obscure, but it's fun to talk about mystery, because we're so, I think we're just generally so inclined usually to discuss only that which we know and we think we fully understand.
Absolutely.
But oh my gosh, the spirit realm, metaphysics, there is so much going on beyond what we see and beyond what we know. Right. Like the fact that we're sitting here having a conversation and scientists can't even tell us why our bodies hold together.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Why we just fall apart.
Like what separates you and me from this table being able to... that's a silly question.
I do understand what you're talking about.
There's just, my point is there's so much mystery. So I've had a couple very interesting dreams, Jim, where, and I believe God speaks through dreams profoundly. That's, 3/4 of the Bible pertains to a dream or a vision. We sleep 1/3 of our life. We spend sleeping. And so I think God has... And even people that aren't walking with the Lord yet, I think there's a spiritual openness that can take place as we sleep.
Yes.
Because our soul is still and quiet, and I think our spirit can be even more open. And sometimes that can be desperately negative. Yeah. And at other times it can be very positive. And I've experienced both, I think. But I remember having a dream recently where I had all these interesting things regarding the native people happening. I had a dream where I was speaking. It was the most interesting thing. A dream where I was speaking to a native woman, but the native woman was the land. And in the dream, it was super normal. You know what I mean? Weird things can happen in dreams, but
it was no problem.
Very, very normal. It's it's an everyday thing. So I'm speaking to this woman, just this beautiful woman, and she literally is an embodiment of the land. And it was a strange thing because it wasn't like she represented the land.
It was.
It was like she literally was the land. I was speaking to the land as if it did have a soul.
Right.
And a being.
That's not too far-fetched, I don't think.
You know?
I mean, not with...
Like, and even biblically, like, you could kind of see that. And I don't, again, we don't have the corner on any of this stuff, but just talking about some of our experience. And then we're talking, and she says, Curtis, I remember everything. And that was really the one line that I was left with. But in that, she was saying it wasn't bitter what she said. It wasn't like out of this place of hurt or unforgiveness, but it was this sense of, I remember everything that takes place on my.
In other words, I keep a record.
I keep a record. It's like our actions have great consequences. You know, like you even talk like on a different plane. People, this is, to speak negative of it, the negative side, people that are oftentimes murdered in houses, that house can oftentimes be left with the residue, that the land itself can be left with a certain spiritual residue.
Absolutely. And
of that event.
I can definitely agree with that.
But it also happens on the other side of where forgiveness happens, reconciliation, where there is there can be spiritual open places in heaven, like to the heavens. Does that make sense?
Oh, to me that makes perfect sense because my family moved around a lot, and I spent a lot of time alone in the woods or camping. Just being out. Camping to me just means that you're out there doing something. You don't have to be doing, but you're camping, and every place has a different spirit. And a few places I was in had a terrifying spirit, especially from about here west. I don't know why, but then as I got going to the mountains in different areas, I never encountered that fearful spirit or whatever it was, but I have encountered it in certain places, and I, ever after that I avoided those places. But, as far as like being out there at night or maybe alone or something like that. But it's just, it's a spirit. I guess I'd call it a spirit.
How do you pick that up?
I don't know.
It's just kind of an inner knowing?
Well, I don't know.
Or when did you first start to experience that? Like, that, I would say that would be what the Bible refers to as a gift of discernment, like a discerning of spirits.
Right, and when I was your age, people told me that, other Christians, they said, you have discernment.
Wow.
I said, okay, well, I didn't know exactly what they meant, but I thought it just meant that I could pick up on other people's spirits a little bit, or what they were feeling. So in other words, I would automatically feel what they were feeling.
Almost like an empathy.
And even if I don't want to feel, and then I would almost, absorb their personality, temporarily.
Yeah.
It's weird. I can't stand it, actually, but I do that. But same thing. So when you're in a place like we were just talking about, you're in a place, any place, it has its own essence, and even you could even break it down to what my brother called a collective mentality. But that would be like in a city. But out in the woods, there's no mentality. I mean, not a collective mentality. So there's an essence or a spirit, and it's like for some reason I could definitely, I guess I can sense things.
Wow. Because
some places were peace. There was peace there. But some places it wasn't peaceful.
It
was quiet, very quiet. There's nothing wrong with the place outwardly, but no, just something wrong, something frightening.
Yes.
Not necessarily. I'm not saying it was necessarily evil either, but it was frightening. Though.
Right. Well, I think the spirit realm is an incredibly. It's a system based on very legal versus non-legal parameters and characteristics. For example, like the verse in Hebrews 8 that says, apart from the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sin. So that's a huge, that's a big statement. Huge statement, huge concept, but the fact that like when we part with our agreement in sin, or in righteousness or even good, we legally partner with spiritual forces that actually back up, or I would say anoint with power and greater emphasis, our own choices. So like when in 1 Corinthians 6, when it talks about you have been purchased by God.
Right.
You were bought with a price, you've been purchased. We are not actually our own. We are now the temple of the Holy Spirit. So there's this legal precedence.
Right.
I think in spiritual forces in which pertains to us as human beings, but also physical land. So if there is I think things that happen that go down on land that are not good, that actually invite evil, there's actually, I think, something like a legal precedence for these demonic spirits. Again, it's both sides, so it's demonic or even angelic, but these things to reside and then have dominion even over that land. And you know, in the Bible it talks about territorial spirits. You know, the story where Jesus is casts the demons out of the legion of demons out of the man, and it says there in the Greek also that they were in the territory. Right. They were specifically assigned to a specific territory and region. Right. And so Jesus confronts the demonized man, and the spirits cry out and say, "Don't cast us out of the region." For whatever reason, that terrified them. Yeah. So he cast the spirits into the pigs. Right. And the pigs run down and drown in water. So there's there's the worst preacher joke ever. That's the original deviled ham.
Okay. Deviled ham. Okay.
Deviled ham. Yeah, it's so bad. But everyone just...
Can we get the waitress to bring us more coffee?
Oh, some more coffee. But
thank you.
There's so much going on there. Like, one, that spirits reside in certain regions. Okay. But two, thanks, honey. Two, that animals can be demonized.
Right. I believe that. I mean, much more easily than people probably. But
which is is just a very, very strange,
it's confusing
topic. So,
but that's not too surprising. I mean, if you've been a farmer for a while, you can actually see. Definitely.
Have you had experiences with that?
Well, I mean, one of my last, the two cattle I had, I just regularly referred to number one steer as the demon-possessed steer. and I don't know if it was, but it sure seemed like it. I mean, the other one was calm and sweet. And this
other one was just
crazy. It was always, I don't know, it was just crazy. But it sure seemed like there was something wrong there.
Wow.
You know.
Wow.
But yeah, I can.
Yeah, it's the spirit realm absolutely fascinates me, Jim, because there's so much that goes on apart from what we see, and I think as Americans we so think like Greeks and only value what we can understand and articulate.
Right.
But the truth is, like, there is so much mystery. There's so much that still needs to unfold. And I mean, if the spirit realm is real and eternity is real, like, the gospel is either fully right or it's wrong. Right. You know what I mean? Like, it's so black and white, it's ridiculous. Right. Like, Jesus was either fully the Son of God and everything he said was real and the miracles he did was real, or he's a total jerk and liar.
Or he's a total fake. Right.
It's like there's no middle ground. Right. So then, taking that at face value, if eternity is real, if Jesus, like, conquered hell and the grave and the spirit realm, as it says in Revelation 1, 17, 18. Like, exploring that absolutely fascinates me. And I think we, as humans, have a deep-seated, inescapable hunger to search that out. Yeah. And you see that, I think, with books like Harry Potter. Sure. With all the vampire stuff, with TV shows on like haunted houses, and a lot of it's totally fear-based.
Sure.
And just totally like, you know, just designed to scare you and give you the adrenaline rush and just be eerie and scary. But I think a lot of it's actually real. But it points back to this deep desire for spiritual awareness, you know, spiritual
definitely
forces. Do you remember as a kid, did you ever have any strange spiritual experiences? Or when was your...
Not so much. I mean, I do, like when I was really young, I remember seeing some really strange things, you know, but I don't know if I had even way to
you know,
articulate it or anything, but I just saw things, you know, but I just kind of saw them and they were stored in my mind for later, you know, but...
right. I remember you mentioning the pillars of light.
Right, and I could have only been 1 or 2 years old, I think. But yeah, it seemed to me that I regularly saw them, you know, like walking around the old house that we lived in, you know.
Wow.
And of course, this is a pretty primitive setting. I mean, it's really old, and usually the house is pretty dark. And we spent a lot of time huddled on couches with blankets. You know, it was cold.
Right.
So and I guess that maybe gave you more chance to observe,
right?
Because you weren't looking at a TV or anything, right? So
yeah.
It's kind of, you know, a baby.
Yeah.
So but I do remember that.
I think there's definitely something there, because I think kids don't have anything to unlearn. They haven't been taught that you can't see spiritual things with your eyes.
No.
You know?
No, not at all. No, fortunately, well, some of them have maybe, but and like JJ with the fee notes that he saw.
Tell me about that.
Well, he was old enough to talk, but he does still have a great imagination too. But when he told me things, I could tell he wasn't making them up. And he said, last night I saw some fee notes. And I said, you saw fee notes? He goes, yeah, they were in my room, these fee notes. And I said, well, what did they look like? He says, well, they had like shining eyes. And he might be able to tell you now what they look like. I can't remember. And I got to thinking, well, where did he come up with the name fee notes anyway? You know, fee notes. And the only thing I can think of is their fear knots. You know, because what do the angels always say to people when they meet them? Don't be afraid.
Wow.
Fear not. So I thought, so that's what I think in my mind. He was seeing fear knots or fee notes, he called them.
Wow.
But, you know, so anyway, he saw weird stuff. Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating. I think one of the craziest, I actually have two stories. Two of the most out of the box stories or encounters that I've had with the spirit realm is one in 2008 and then one a few years later. But when so I think you know most of my story, but I grew up going to church and stuff, but it was very irrelevant to me. God just didn't, God seemed very distant. Church was more of a social club and more just tradition of man instead of what I would consider to be like genuine connection and relationship with God, you know, instead of just rules.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of journey there, but I was actually a drug addict, dealing drugs, very broken place, like didn't want to live anymore type of broken. And
that was only 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
That seems so short time.
Drinking almost daily, drinking at school, like just out of control, you know, just so hurting on the inside, in terrible relationships with people, and really I was so mad at God because I had attributed a lot of the suffering in my life to like, where were you? Or this is your fault type thing. Obviously not thinking I have any responsibility in the matter and I have my own choices to make. But I remember going to a Christian family camp in the center of British Columbia. Didn't want to go at all. I'd been there a couple years prior. And actually had some genuine experiences with God. Like it was as if I got on the land, Jim, and it was like this cloud would lift off of me. And that's the best way I can describe it. It was like I see clearly, I see and think clearly. It's like I know my I know why I'm alive when I'm on this land.
Well, you're on that one.
Yeah, it's called the fate. Hey, honey, tell people about Patreon.
Sorry, I had to break really quickly. If you like the Wise Life Blueprint, which, if you're watching this,
What's going on?
Sir, please stay off the road. If you like the Wise Life Blueprint, which I'm sure you do if you're watching this, you should subscribe. You should donate $1 a month.
And subscribe.
Because you don't want us to become broke-ass millennials because my husband's doing a podcast full-time.
And it takes a lot of time.
It does take a lot of time.
And it's silly, but we love it.
But yeah. So yeah.
Mission, and it's been a Christian camp for 100 years type thing. It's been around forever. So a lot of good has happened on that land. Like this is a land like dedicated to the Lord. Okay. So something would happen when I would step foot on this land a day in, 2 days in. It didn't matter what I was going through or how addicted I was to whatever. Something would like lift off of me, and it was like I can see spiritually. So interesting. So the first night I'm there, I don't want to be there at all, but I'm mad at God. I'm like just again very broken place. Didn't want to really live. And some of the other young people, it's like late at night, there's no youth leader in the room, but some of the other youth are there, and they're like talking about how their year was, how are you doing? They ask me how I'm doing. Right. And I'm like, I don't know how to tell them how I'm doing because they asked me how my year was, and I'm like,
don't want to say.
I don't want to say anything, but I'm also like, I don't even remember my year, let alone telling you about my year. Like I was stoned the whole year,
Okay, yeah.
Like I was drunk the whole year. I don't really remember what happened, but I'm like, I broke up with this girl and got really depressed, and now I'm just still depressed, basically.
So you told them that?
I told them that. Okay. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Like they were very genuine and very sweet, because all of my friends at that point, all they did was party. There was no care for how I was actually doing. It was all very selfishly motivated. So they're like, one friend is like, have you ever heard about spiritual warfare? Because I'm talking about depression, and she's like, depression is actually a spirit. And I'm like, spiritual warfare? I was like, that sounds like Star Wars or something. Sure. Or like some sort of sci-fi book. Right. Having grown up in the church, I'd never...
And they wouldn't have put it in those words, right?
They actually said spiritual warfare.
But at your church? Or?
No, not at my church, but friends.
And absolutely. And
they were young. There was no like leader in the room.
It's clearly backed up by the Bible. I mean,
very clearly.
Over and over again, right?
Yeah, over and over. And I'm like, no, I've never heard of that. And so they proceed to tell stories. Okay. They start telling me stories about experiences that they'd had with spiritual things and angels and even demons, and like these ominous presence and dark figures standing in a room and then it's gone type thing, and angels. And we're just fascinated, we're just like locked in to these conversations. And it was the weirdest thing, Jim, but it was as if, I'm sure you've experienced, probably in the woods in different times, this ominous like fear and terror that's so thick in the room. It's like you can cut it with a knife. It's like
absolutely. I have, and not in public, but in the woods. Yeah, so it's opposite a little bit of yours.
Yeah, it's like something is watching me. Something is here. Like, and so there's like 10 of us in the room. It's later at night. And we are all, people, one by one, just start weeping because of the fear. It wasn't just me.
They weren't weeping for joy.
No, it was like sheer terror. It was the strangest thing. So they're telling stories, and I'm like, all I want to do is pray. All I want to do is like, I just know that I know that the answer to this situation is that we need to pray together. I'm a drug addict, drug dealer. The last thing ever I want to do logically is pray, but somehow I know inside of me that we need to pray. So finally, I'm like, we need to pray. So we get down on our knees, hold hands in a circle. It's probably 12:30 or something at this point, into the evening. And we start to pray, and it's like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like a battle scene. It's like war going on. It was very intense. People are crying. We're like crying out to God, like, would you help? It's indescribable and hard to relate to, but it was this very deep, very spiritual moment. We found out later that during that probably lasted maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes of this deep, intense warfare type prayer. We were in a room, obviously, that was full of light. It was lit up. Like lights on the ceiling.
Dark.
It wasn't dark. Dark outside, obviously. But my friend Alex, I was just literally texting her today. Alex Higginson, friends with her for forever. She was 20 years old at that time. She told us afterward that she opened her eyes during the time we were praying and she was completely blind. She said she couldn't see her hand in front of her face. She couldn't see anything in the room. It was like...
That would be frightening.
She was completely like blackout blinded, which that's a very biblical thing. Spiritually, that can actually happen.
Right.
In the Bible, like there's multiple instances of people being blinded or mute or whatever. I think that was a demonic manifestation of what was happening in the room. So we were praying and praying. All of a sudden, the most dramatic moment of my entire life, the darkness like shatters. And everyone at the same time goes dead silent in the room. Dead, just at the same, no one says, everyone be quiet. It's as if we all discerned the exact same moment that the darkness left and the Lord Jesus stepped into the room, you know? And it just fleed and shattered. And at that moment, I was on my knees and I felt a hand come and touch the back of my head, very lightly. And I'm weeping at this point because I've never felt peace like this in my entire life. Like I had done multiple kinds of drugs, multiple combinations of drugs. I've, I'd searched, for peace with women, with, fill in the blank. And I had never, ever found the peace like this. It was the best drug ever. It was real. It was pure. It was like, it filled me as if it was a liquid, and it was just overflowing. And so I'm weeping because of the sense of this peace. And I sit up, and I think, someone's got, one of the friends has got their hand, my eyes are closed. Right. So I think someone's got their hand on the back of my head. And I'm like, this is incredible. Who is praying for me right now? And then I get this strange sense of like, is there someone behind me? Or like, what's going on? And I like, so adjust, the hand's still there. And eventually, and this peace, just insane. I turn around to look who's behind me and there's no one there. But the hand is still in the back of my head. And I'm like, all right, this is Jesus. Like, this is a real encounter with God. I got up from that experience, it was late, and I couldn't even really walk straight. It was like I was, people talk about being drunk in the spirit. I had never really heard of that or really seen that. And from what I had seen, I was skeptical of it, but I felt intoxicated, I genuinely felt like, wow, I just took a few shots or something. Like, wow, this is really quite something. And so I woke up the next day, Jim, and I was a different person. And I could go into all the details of what had happened, but I had no addiction to drugs. I tried to quit smoking cigarettes for 4 years, could never do it, had no desire to smoke, had no desire to drink. I had love in my heart for people. Like, it was just one thing after another, and that was actually the encounter with the Lord that changed and shifted my whole life. But it's the spiritual realm invading our little lives, I think, that so changes things.
Exactly. That's a good story. I really liked what you said about the So when you went to this certain place, you experienced a lifting, right? So the longer you were there, the more free and normal you felt. And boy, I've experienced that so many times. I mean,
really.
And I always tell people, well, I've lived around here too long, you know. That's it, you know. And like we talked about being connected, you know. And in a way, it's like, but I could go anywhere, you know. Certain places, if I go there, immediately have that sense of everything lifting
clarity.
off, right? It's like, oh, life isn't all that bad, really. You know?
Wow.
And you know, it's strange. But,
that is.
So there's something, but some people would say, no, God works everywhere the same. Well, maybe, but there is something, I think there is something to specific places, like you said.
Right.
There's always been special places, you know, where there seems like there is a sanctification about it.
Yeah. What about, you mentioned the story with Boulder Creek.
Right. Oh, you were talking about that fear. I don't know if this was, but yeah, it was, it's pretty unusual. Now, it's still possible to get up there, although a lot of times...
Where's Boulder Creek?
So it's northwest of here. It's near a place, you know, and where they have like a stand of really huge trees up there too. But this creek, anyway, comes from the Coast Range. And there's a road that starts up it, and then the road turns away. And so basically it's just a creek and a canyon, you know, right? And so my father took us there years ago, and that's how I knew about it. So I started, you know, showing my friends some of my secret places. And so my friend Mike and I decided, hey, we're going to go up camp at Boulder Creek, you know, and then we'll camp at night, and then we'll get up in the morning and go fishing, get a whole bunch of trout, and we'll be out of there, you know. So, But anyway, that part of the Coast Range, there's something about it. I mean, and I like to joke, well, it's all the ghosts of all those, you know, dead loggers and Indians and stuff, you know, whatever. But I don't know. But so we set up our little camp. It wasn't a very good camp. It was just kind of in some little trees and shrubs, you know. Got a little fire going, said, okay, we're going to go sleep, and, you know, then we'll go fishing in the morning. So we got the fire stoked, going to bed, you know, got dark. It was probably 9 o'clock. And a little drizzle going, drizzly rain. And everything was great, you know. And I have this story written too, so I might have to refer to that at some point. But, so yeah, I think I was just starting to doze off, you know. And you could faintly hear the river down below us. You know? But anyway, I heard what sounded like a tenor voice singing, like maybe a man or a woman, I couldn't tell. It was a tenor voice, you know, kind of chanting wordless melody, sort of, you know, with a lot of minor notes. And I'm listening to it, and I thought, well, that's really strange that the river could make a noise like that, you know. So I'm listening, and then after a while, like another voice comes in, you know, and they're like harmonizing. And I kept listening, you know, and I grew more and more fascinated with this, you know.
And you're not asleep.
Oh, no.
You're just laying.
No, I had almost been asleep.
Right.
When I started hearing the voice, and who knows why, you know, that would bother me, you know. But anyway, there wasn't anybody. No, there was no one around there. I mean, in those days, we were the only people up there in that whole region, as far as I know. And there weren't any other roads or anything in there, no parks. So anyway, but after a while, and once again, I'm having trouble recalling what it felt like. But for years, I could distinctly remember the utter horror, you know, that came over me. So after a while, the singing, you know, got louder, and pretty soon there were many voices, and they're all singing these strange, beautiful melodies, you know. And I mean, you're talking like it sounded like a choir of hundreds after a while. And I'm like listening to this, and my friend Mike's over there asleep, and he had like a knife, and I had a pistol, right? So I'm like clutching my pistol. I'm listening to this go on and on. And really, if you think about it, so what's so terrifying about hearing some kind of a choir in the middle of the night? Well, I don't know, but at that time, it just, all of a sudden, I was just utterly terrified.
Yes.
And I thought, okay, and the main thought, it was like in the darkness, this pulsing thought. You know, it's like the whole woods around me was alive with this spirit or thought, and the thought saying, you are not ever going to get out of here alive. There's nothing you can do. Death is inevitable for you. And I'm like, oh, great. And I'm thinking, it's right, because this pistol, I can't do a thing. I can't see anything. It's pitch dark. All these voices are singing. And so I don't know, and like you said, it has to be some kind of a spiritual thing, because it's not like I'm going to derive terror from hearing these voices, right? Because it was actually kind of beautiful in its own way.
Right.
So I never could figure out. But anyway, so this went on and on. And, I was really scared. But I knew that I'm not going to get up and run. That's what I wanted to do. But it was miles to get out of there, and on bad roads in the middle of the night,
Right.
And as far as I knew, Mike was asleep. And so I thought the only thing to do is just sit here and take it, just take it, try to plug my ears.
How long do you think it went on for?
It seemed that it went on for hours. But it probably only went on for like a couple hours before.
That's a long time.
It seemed, but it was the longest night of my life, for sure. And other than maybe camping up on top of South Sister with Bethany, that was long too. But this was long. It just went on and on. And all of a sudden, just about when the singing's really going, it's really getting louder. And I'm thinking, well, so maybe I'm going crazy, is my imagination.
Right.
And then my buddy Mike, all of a sudden he goes, "Hey, Jim." I go, "Yeah?" He says, "You hear the singing?" I go, "Yeah, I hear it." And he's like, "Death is inevitable."
No.
So I knew right then, so we both have the exact same thought in our head from the death is inevitable.
That's the most terrifying thing ever. Why would he say that? Well,
because it was either reading my mind.
Yeah, I get why.
So the question
oh my
is,
gosh.
So is this a small mass hallucination, or is it, and we're not drinking or anything. We're just going up there to go fishing, and we were so scared, nobody even got to put a piece of wood on the fire or anything. We didn't want to move a muscle, because it was like, better not move, because whatever it is out there just, is going to get us, And so finally...
Oh my...
So after hours, finally, I did finally doze off. It seemed like the singing died away after a while. And
so it started with one voice?
Yeah, it was just one voice at first,
And
really
minor notes?
It seemed like a lot of minor notes, and every once in a while I could sort of hear some of it in my mind. And then perhaps even that music has worked its way into some of my music that I do now. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I don't consciously remember what the melodies were. No words, though. It was all like Gregorian chanting. A lot of it was. Okay. But finally, I dozed off. But I got a little more hopeful. Said, well, we're still alive, and Mike's here. He's alive, and so, I finally dozed off, and I woke up with a start, because it was just starting to get a little bit light. And I was facing east. And the sky was getting lighter. Yeah. And I woke up, and there's this dark hooded figure standing over me. And I grabbed the pistol, and then I realized the dark hooded figure was this drooping hemlock tree that looked just like a Black Rider from The Lord of the Rings. And I hadn't been able to see it in the dark.
Right.
But it looked
exactly like...
It scared the heck out of me, and then I realized, it's getting light. That's why I can see the tree. It's getting light.
Right.
It's getting light. So anyway, so it got light, and we didn't even go fishing. We just said, let's get out of here. So, and we didn't really talk about it. We talked about it later. And you can ask Mike if you ever talk to him.
Yeah.
And he'll tell you the exact same story, with maybe some things I don't remember. But
sure.
But so it was terrifying.
It was the one voice that started, and then at what point did the multiple voices?
Well,
did it sound like it was coming from one source, or was it a surrounding?
That's one thing that worried me, because it sounded like it came from everywhere.
Yeah.
But then it was hard to tell whether your imagination says, well, is it just a bunch of little tiny creatures this big singing?
Right.
Or is it someone further away singing, but they're all evenly spaced, or it's like stereo effect,
Right.
It was really strange, but beautiful and haunting, but...
so that's an interesting aspect of it as well, because it sounded beautiful, but it was terrifying. Do you think it was terrifying because it was unknown, or did it feel like? Do you think it was the Lord, or do you think it was angelic, or do you think it was some sort of spiritual weird thing in the land? Do you have any idea?
I've always thought maybe it had something to do with that piece of land.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But because it is a pretty different area. It's kind of remote and rugged, and really wet and dark. It's a kind of a place. Sometimes I call it the land of eternal twilight, because you go up there picking mushrooms, 2 o'clock, you're up there, and it's like, wow, it's getting dark. You know? And the forests are all dark, very dark inside. And in fact, you know, my brother Brady, so that whole area up there, for, you know, that we call Boulder Creek, and then up Black Rock Main Line goes all the way up and over.
Yeah.
And in those days, you could drive wherever you wanted to.
Yeah.
And so he was up there, and he decided after work to go picking mushrooms by himself.
Okay.
And he got way, way up there somewhere. And he got quite a few mushrooms, but he was tired from work, so he's in it. He had a little brown car, like a Nissan. So he's taking a nap in the car. I figured, well, I'm gonna take a nap before I head back. It was still daylight, right? So while he was napping, he had a dream. And in the dream, he was napping in the car. Right?
Some Inception stuff going on there.
In his dream, he's napping, and suddenly someone knocks on the window. And he rolls the window down, and here's this guy, and I can't remember his name, but it was a guy that we both knew who had died a couple years earlier and gone missing up in that area. Okay? Can't remember his name. He goes, Brady.
Really?
And Brady says, oh, let's call him Sam or something. Sam, I thought you were, you'd gone missing. He goes, oh, no, I'm fine. I just want checking on you and see if you're all right. He goes, yeah, I'm okay. I'm kind of tired. I'm just gonna have to drive out of here. Well, and in the dream, he was like suddenly kind of afraid. So he said, well, I'll talk to you later. So he, started his car, put it in gear, and went roaring down the road in the dim headlights. And all of a sudden, the road just ended, and it was nothing but forest. Right? And that's it. And then he woke up. This is the dream. So then he wakes up. And he realizes he'd been dreaming. And he was filled with that terrible fear again. Right. He's like, I gotta get out of here. And he realized he'd taken a nap and slept for several hours. It was now pitch black. And he was way up in the middle of the coast range by himself, which could add to the terror, I'm sure. Right. But he was really scared. And he just full speed ahead. He got out of there, and his car held up, and he made it out of there. But the dream, if I remember it right, it was a pretty scary dream because it was just seeing that guy, just like, hey,
Totally.
It's pretty weird.
Totally. Oh my gosh.
But he was kind of a dreamer. He always had, even as he was a kid, he had a lot of strange dreams.
Specific dreams. I'm still blown away by, so you're up there with Mike with the voices.
Right.
And when you guys have talked about this after the event, what have you guys talked about?
Well, we kind of tried to verify with each other.
Yeah.
Is this what you heard? Yes, this is what I heard, and we had the same sensation, of utter fear.
Yeah.
That definitely weren't going to make it out of there. And so that's like what do you call it? A subliminal message from the surrounding darkness or something.
Yeah.
I don't have a way to explain it. And so I'll talk about my father for a minute. He was absolutely unsuperstitious, right?
Okay, just very logical guy, line upon line.
Yeah, didn't believe in ghosts, and I pretty much followed suit in that.
Yeah.
So I just try to report what I saw and heard. Well, this is what I saw, this is what I heard, this is what I felt.
Yeah.
So that's all I know. So I don't try to embellish anything. But my father told me, one of the things he told me, he says, don't ever let me catch you playing with a Ouija board.
Wow.
So, and I've read other accounts, even by humor writers, who said, I'm never going to touch a Ouija board again.
Wow.
So there is something to that.
For sure.
Ouija business, right?
Yep.
So it's like, okay, in other words, better left alone.
For sure.
Okay, better left alone.
Yeah.
And he told me once, he says, well, if you're ever out in the woods, and if you get a really terrible feeling, it probably means that a cougar's watching.
Wow.
And now that I do know that feeling now,
He told you that.
It's true, and it's the same. But it's not it's a feeling of deep dread, and danger.
Wow.
Right, but it wasn't as deep as what we felt. It wasn't quite like that. That was more like an ominous.
Yeah, it was different.
And I did wonder. I said, well, maybe was it? I know maybe the presence of God could be terrifying like that. And I didn't say it was an evil feeling. I just said it was terrifying, But it was something. So
that's fascinating. And we talked about this cougar story.
Sure.
When you were last podcast, when you were logging, and you felt this strange dread.
I felt danger.
Danger. This ominous.
Right.
And you were looking around, and there was nothing there that you could see.
Right.
And so you just kept working, but it didn't go away.
Right.
And then this cougar appears who it was behind you
Right.
and had been stalking
It had
you.
been stalking me, yeah.
Which, if you really, like, I mean, that's an amazing, you end up escaping and you got away unscathed, but that makes no logical sense.
It doesn't. Because that's like...
It makes no logical sense because somehow you knew and discerned
Sure.
that
But
this thing was watching you.
Right.
So there's something in, I don't know what it is, in the spirit, in metaphysics, in
Something there.
like your own discernment. Maybe it's the Lord warning
Well,
you
maybe it's that too.
like there's imminent danger.
That could be, sure.
You know, it's just so interesting.
Right.
But one, you know, like you said, what was that? Those voices that were singing. You know, it's interesting. You look at biblical encounters where people encounter angels.
Yeah.
They're on their face, utterly terrified, and think they're going to die.
Well, that's what I wonder.
You know.
Yeah.
So there is. I mean, the Bible talks about the fear of the Lord all the time. Like His holiness and His presence is so utterly immense that human capacity shrivels in its in reverence, you know, to a God that is omnipresent and holy and you know, perfect and pure. But that's such a mystery. What a mystery! Oh my gosh! I know probably one of the most profound spiritual stories I've ever heard. And that I can't really explain again is by this woman, Nancy Cohen.
Right.
And like I said, she was a preacher. She's a preacher from Texas. You know, grew up in the church and stuff, and then became a ravenous atheist because she's like just super disillusioned by the church and didn't want anything to do with religion and God. But then ended up having some profound spiritual experiences that she ended up giving her heart back to the Lord. But she does a lot of work with deliverance.
Okay.
And so like stuff.
Oh, wow.
Like fringy stuff, like exorcisms and casting out demons, which is utterly biblical. Our North American Christianity doesn't really have a spot for it because it's just weird and overly spiritual, and a lot of people I think have abused it. But I mean, Jesus said, "In my name, you'll cast out demons." You know, you will. I've given you authority over spiritual forces. It's all through the Bible. I mean, it's absolutely everywhere.
Right.
And so she is a deliverance minister, had been for like 30 years. Like it's all she would do for 5 days a week is travel around the country and cast demons out of people because her name would get around that. She had a gift, an ability to be able to take care of very dark things.
Good.
So, she had 3 businesses at this point and is in real estate. So she was out late, I believe this was in Texas, out late and was doing a deal overseas, and escrow closed at like 12 midnight. So she's walking back to her car and had to walk by this known nightclub in the area, which was a satanic nightclub in Texas. So she's walking by, and out front there's all of these guys with piercings all over their body, and tattoos and different color hairs. There's a 8-foot long boa constrictor python on one guy's, and they're like catcalling her and making all these gross sexual innuendos, and she walks by and just like trying to get to her car, and she actually tells the story way better than I'm going to do it, and lots more detail. But she walks by and she feels the Lord tell her, "You need to go inside.
Really?
I want you to go inside this nightclub." And she'd had so many experiences with demons and things that she wasn't actually afraid. She was more inconvenienced. It was like, no, that's just not wisdom for me to go in there. My husband's wondering where I am. It's 12 o'clock at night. And so she's like, no, she walks another block, and then the Lord speaks to her very clearly and says, "Did you or did you not say you would follow me and obey what I asked you to do?" And she said, yes, Lord. You know, like I did say that, and she's like, well, maybe if I just go over there, the Lord will let me off the hook. You know, like an Abraham and Isaac thing, raise the knife and. And then the Lord's like, just kidding.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Just testing you. I just wanted to see if you'd do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As we often do when he asks us to do crazy things. So she goes over there, and the guy, she walks, starts walking through the doorway. Now this is actually a specific type of, I don't know if you'd call it witchcraft or demonic order, but it was the Satanic Order of Melchizedek. That's the, I guess, like probably like how Christians would have denominations.
Sure.
You know, like I think the Satanic Church, if you will, has different sects or sectors of it. So this is the Satanic Order of Melchizedek. And Melchizedek is referred to a few times in the Bible, but is this kind of obscure character who has no beginning of days and no end of life. It's a type of Christ in Ephesians 6 and 7, or Hebrews 6 and 7.
After the order of Melchizedek, right?
So there's a whole bunch of theology that we won't necessarily get into, but the bottom line is Melchizedek has to do with eternity, it has to do with the spiritual realm, it has to do with life beyond death, like an endless, eternal life. So, and I don't know, I haven't researched these people or, what they fully believe, but she walks through the doors, is just kind of getting into the, area, and the guys in the front doors are like whispering in her ear and like licking her earlobe and like
that sounds awful. Just
like touching her and saying the most terrible things, and she just continues into the further into the the club. She gets into where she's in the main room, and everything stops. There's music going. There's like everything, the strangest thing, she didn't say a word, Jim.
Right, I mean, just a woman.
But everything, and she's dressed to the nines with, her, suit. She's doing real estate deal, so she looks totally out of place. Right. But a couple hundred people turn and just staring at her. The music, it's just dead silent. You can hear a pin drop. And there is, all the women are wearing just see-through vase. They're all like painted white, blacked out eyes. Piercings everywhere. There's jars of urine on the tables with upside down crosses in them. They're all like tattooed out with these like demonic Garden of Eden, like horrendous scenes of Adam and Eve and this weird stuff. There's like human bones strewn on the table, and people are like wearing these necklaces of like bones and stuff. Just dark. And she walks into the room, everyone just goes dead silent, staring at her. And she's like, Lord, what do I do? Thinking to herself. It is just silent for like 2 or 3 minutes, which is a long time. And inside she's thinking, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? God, what do you ask? Like, what should I do? And he tells her, go walk to the center of the room, or the kind of the front of the room. Right. And she's like, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to share the gospel, like preach the gospel to all these people. So she goes up, and she's just standing there, and there's no words, but she's in the ears of her spirit is the best way she described it. She's hearing this sound, this crying, moaning, like wheezing sound, and it was she knew it was the sound of creation crying out for the sons and daughters of God. She's looking into the eyes of the people, and it was just black darkness, emptiness, murder and rage and deceit and bitterness, and she's just hearing in her spirit this sound of all creation crying and moaning and crying out, And so she's asking God, what do I do with this? And she hears the Lord say, sound back just make us like sound back. And she's like, God, what does that mean? I have no idea what that means. So she literally, Jim, just stands there and is just staring. Staring.
She still hasn't said anything.
She hasn't said a word. Staring, staring, staring. And then she's like, I don't know what this means. I don't know what to do. So she literally just stares at them and then slowly walks out the door and leaves. And she thinks to herself, like, that was ridiculous. That was so dumb. What did I just do?
Right.
I must have just, like, I totally disobeyed God. Like, I totally failed.
Yeah.
So for years, 2 years, that was her interpretation of what had happened in that room. Never told anyone. Didn't even tell her husband because she was embarrassed. She was embarrassed by like it was totally dumb. She didn't share anything with anyone. So she's in a meeting, preaching at a conference 2 years later. After the conference, she's done speaking. This woman comes up to her and says, "Do you remember me?" And she's like, "No, I'm so sorry. Like, I minister to so many people. I have no memory or recollection of what, of who you are." And this woman says, "I was the satanic high priestess and the leader of this satanic order of Melchizedek in that nightclub 2 years ago." And she's like, everything perked up in my spirit. Like, she never told a soul about this.
Right.
And this woman,
the only people that would know
that was the ones that were there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's like a secret.
And she's like, the Satanist lady was like, of course you wouldn't remember me because I'm like, I look completely different now.
She wouldn't.
So this is her interpretation of what happened. She said to Nancy, when you walked in and went up to the front, she said, I was paralyzed. She said, I physically could not move my body. And she said, everything, all I wanted to do was run up to you, tear you limb from limb, and drink your blood.
Oh my God.
She was like, I was full of rage.
Wow.
And
so she was, that's scary.
But she said, I physically could not move. Physically paralyzed. And she said, when you walked from the door up to the front and stood there, she said, you became a being of light. Physically with her eyes. She and actually everyone in the room saw this being, literally like being of radiant light, which you can very easily pull that apart from the Bible. Like, Jesus is the light of the world. Colossians 1:27, Christ is now in us, the hope of glory. Like, Moses' face shone with bright light because of the presence of God on him and in him. And Christ is now in us. And you don't hear about it very often, but why could he not manifest light?
Of course.
So she, just standing there, manifested just light to all these people in the room. And they all knew it was the Lord Jesus.
They all knew who the light was.
They all knew inside of themselves it was Jesus. So then it happened, for however long, and then she got up and left. When she left, the satanic high priestess was completely blind. Went physically completely blind. So she's like, and was very just in utter turmoil on the inside, because all these demonic spirits and things were obviously tormenting her. So she had some of her people take her back to her apartment, where she was just, blind for days.
Oh, wow.
Actually for days, which that happened to the Apostle Paul.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So there's
a
thing there. But then the people that she were scared for her, her demonic followers or whatever.
Yeah.
They ended up leaving, and she ends up bursting out speaking in tongues. Just bursts out speaking in tongues and gives her heart to the Lord Jesus, because gets saved on her own, because this, like, God's presence was so strong that there was nowhere else for her to go. That she had experienced a power greater, you know, than all the power she had experienced in the demonic realm.
Absolutely.
So they're having this conversation. She tells everything that happens, and then she says, and Nancy's just blown away, right? And then she says, and since then, 2 years ago, I've led 90% of that entire order of people, a satanic order, to the Lord Jesus. She's like, we have our own little church.
That's crazy. Huh. Well, it's so believable to me, though. I mean, that's kind of,
totally.
What I find encouraging, really encouraging, though, is that she never had to say anything.
Right.
Or she maybe couldn't have said it.
Yeah.
Right. And so she didn't do. And he said make a sound or whatever she did. But anyway.
Sound back.
Right. But that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really.
Yeah.
I think there's a great lesson there too. I mean, you know, you don't have to. What's the old saying? You know, preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words or something like that. Right. So,
Totally. Oh, I think it's fascinating stuff. It's like there's maybe we can wrap it up with this, but have you? There's a whole sector of people that talk about aliens, UFO experiences, and these different things, and I'm pretty well convinced that is just people having experiences with spiritual forces that manifest themselves in certain ways. Yeah. Like, would you say you believe in ghosts?
I'm not sure. That's one of those undecided. I mean, like I say, because, you know, when I became a Christian, I pretty much accepted the idea that, you know, the Bible says, well, so when you die, you sleep until Judgment Day.
Yeah.
Right? So it's hard for me to imagine that there's a ghost. But then I've read, you know, C.S. Lewis kind of hints a little bit about ghosts and things that, you know, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I know, you know, strange things. But the ghost thing, though. Now, see, what I think is very possible is for a spirit to masquerade as a ghost of someone. Right. So you might think, oh, I'm seeing talking to my dead father, you know, or whatever, but you're not really. I mean, So, then the aliens, you know, I don't think, I mean, I think there are other worlds, but they're cut off from us, and I don't think they would want anything to do with us. Right. Because, you know, we're a sinful planet, and they may not be. Maybe they never sinned over there in Galaxy 58 or something, you know. So it's like, we're not having nothing to do with those people. Right. You know, So I don't know, that's just an idea, but so the people see some really odd lights and things. You know, like even during World War II, there was a lot of the sightings. Pilots would see all kinds of weird stuff. During missions, the Foo Fighters, or the British called them Foo Fighters. You know, those are. Anyways, these balls of light would come up alongside of the plane, just fly with them for a while, and then they go, then they zip off, disappear, and then like during the heat of the battle, here comes more of them, little balls of. They were like this big. You know, what? Foo Fighters. You probably could look it up. You know, Foo Fighters during World War II. Seriously. There was a lot of that was seen by, you know, bomber, you know, like gunners in bombers, stuff like that. I'm like, what is that? You know, and they're just seeing these weird things. You know, they're flying alongside the plane. You know, which, to me, of course, I immediately think, oh yeah, it's obvious it was an angel.
Oh, that's totally angelic. I had no idea.
No, absolutely. Wow. I read lots of stories about that.
Wow. So yeah, I think there is definitely biblically you see references and things of like seances where people will call spirits back, spirits of people back. Right. I think there's multiple things going on. One of the most fascinating books I've ever read on spiritual realities is by a guy lived in the early 1900s called Sadhu Sundar Singh. And he was a rabid Muslim, persecuted Christians, would throw rocks at Christians as a kid, you know, and was very drawn to prayer and meditation in like looking for God as a Muslim. Sure. Ends up hanging himself, or he's literally about to, you know, jump off the plank type thing and hang himself. Really? And because he was crying out to God, no one was answering. To Muhammad, and he's like, this is ridiculous, like I want like, God, I need your help. If you're real, save me. The Lord Jesus appears in a vision to him that he sees with his eyes.
Right.
So I don't even think that's necessarily a vision. We would call that an open vision.
Okay.
You know, like you're seeing it physically with your eyes.
So you're seeing it.
You're seeing it.
Either way.
And it's not just in your mind, it's with your eyes. So the Lord Jesus leads him to the Lord Jesus.
Right.
You know,
I'm Jesus.
it's like, I'm Jesus.
You've been looking for me.
You've been looking for me. You will serve me. Tells him a bunch of stuff about his life. So he gets radically saved and starts having these, you know, living this incredible lifestyle of sharing the gospel with all these Muslims and leading all these Muslims to the Lord, being, you know, crazy persecuted. But he would have the most unbelievable spiritual visions and experiences with God I've ever actually experienced. Like, he was in the desert at one point you would pray often in the desert.
Yeah.
And this small child came up to him, and the child was starts talking to him, and he's like just having this conversation. He's like, where does this kid come from? Conversation. He's like, you know, and he sounded very logical and very like, he was very forthright and very, you know, all these things. And then started talking about, you know, if you do this, this, and this, you know, I can give you this kingdom.
Sure.
I can give you all of this influence and all of these followers. And am I, you know, referring to all this? And I'm butchering the story.
No, but I'm getting it. I'm getting it.
But it was essentially, you know, like a blueprint, the same experience that Jesus had in Matthew chapter 4,
right,
in the desert, where the devil came to tempt him in these different areas, promising him, you know, influence and followers, and then he realized, this is the devil. Like, I'm talking to a demonic manifestation. And so he basically, I don't know how it all unfolded, but he rebukes this thing, and it leaves and walks away. And then the Lord Jesus, like the Lord, the same Jesus that had appeared to him when he'd, you know, gotten saved all the years earlier, appears to him and says, because you have, and these are well-documented stories, you know, that you can read all the details. He says, because you have obeyed me and chosen to follow me, I'm going to now give you the ability to ask me whatever questions you want and talk talk with me whenever you want.
No kidding. Like an open challenge.
Open dialogue with the Lord Jesus. So he, for the rest of his life, he had this ability to dialogue with Jesus and have specific answers to specific questions. And he said about once or twice every month, he would be in prayer and meditation and would be kind of caught up. You know, the Apostle Paul talks about being caught up into the third heaven. Oh, yeah. You know, in the spirit, and would, you know, experience spiritual things and realities. So, this would take another, you know, few hours to unpack fully. But he had the most interesting spiritual experiences with saints and angels and with even heavenly creatures and the whole spiritual realm and dominion. And that's a book I would definitely recommend to people. And I don't necessarily know if I would agree with all the theology in the book, but it's an amazing thing. Even just start asking questions and get your wheels turning about how the spirit realm works. It's called Visions of the Spiritual World by Sadhu Sundar Singh. Amazing book. He was actually famous in America in like 1906.
Okay, this is a long time ago. Okay.
He would speak in like Los Angeles, and the streets would be packed.
Really?
He was known as like a spiritual leader and guru, you know, of Christianity, of that time. Just an amazing guy, but fascinating stuff.
It is.
So, thanks for doing this, Jim.
Hey, you bet. So, are you going to do any more podcasts today with anybody else?
No, I think we'll...
I think there's one?
I think, yeah. We're running out of time, man. We're up in Oregon.
It was getting dark,
with you and Sue, and JJ's, your son, is back from the nuclear submarine, and it's fun hanging out with you guys.
Yeah.
and doing life.
Well, we like your studio.
I know. So we converted your living room here into the perfect little...
How would it be for recording music, do you think?
Oh, we should totally do that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We'll get part 2 going here in a second.
Okay.
Do some music?
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Video it.
We got a couple new songs.
Yeah, why not?
We should do it now when the video camera's up.
Yeah, let's do it. It's all set up.
So, can you like pause it or anything? Or do you have to? Well, let's take a break and then think about what you want to do. If you want to do more.
Thanks for doing it, Jim.
You bet. Curtis.
Thank you.